What's up, TJ? Welcome to part 2. In this one, I'm going to go ahead and try and get users set up. For starters, you can just see that I've changed this content here on index.html just to make it clear. This is the first page that the user will land on if they visit the basic route. Before I move forward with user registration and creation, all of that, I'm going to start with extending the layout into every other page and starting to separate the HTML, and I'll create a static folder as well to store favicons and other associated images. So I want to do a couple of things to this layout page. For one, I'll go ahead and replace this with this. I will also go ahead and throw that in there. And the body I will want to replace with that. Now over here on the index page, I can pretty much get rid of everything except for the body for starters. Here at the top, I'll throw this line in to extend the layout that we just created. I'm going to want to throw the title of this page in over here. And we'll call it index page. Now, instead of body HTML tags, we will want Django tags that just say block body and one word end block. I'll also want to create a static folder inside of here. And inside of that static folder to namespace job report app. And another thing is I went back here to the index page and I changed these double quotes to single quotes. That's apparently important because it was throwing up a nasty error without doing that. But now that that's been done, you can see the server's running and it's working still with template inheritance. Now I'm just going to set the favicon real fast with that code over there. And I'm also going to drag this image into the static folder that I created into job report. And so there it goes. I'll save this. Oh, and also create this images folder. Let's go ahead and put that in there. Move, just because that's what my code is actually telling it to do. So I'll save that. And now once we restart the server, if we clear our browser history, our cache, then we can see our favicon now in place. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is get my own style sheet loaded in here. So there's a Django way to do that, as it turns out. We're going to create a link element with an href of, and we open some curly braces and write some Django syntax here. Static, we'll say job report app slash styles.css. We'll have to create that folder, and then we'll close that and close the curly brackets, ending the Django syntax. And then before we close the element itself, give it a relationship attribute of style sheet so that it's aware of what it is. So now I'll go ahead and create a new file inside of this folder, and I will call it styles.css. And there we go. Next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and set up SASS. So I will stop the server. I will see what's listed here. I'm gonna cd into job report app, and in there I'm gonna go into the static folder and make sure that this is where, see, I have to go one more time into job report app. I have to make sure that I am where the styles.css is, and once I am, I can run SASS, the input file styles.css, and the output file the input file styles.scss, and then styles.css. So it turns out I was a little confused there. What you want to do is actually create the styles.scss file first, and then go ahead and run SASS, and it'll take in the input and place it into the output. And you can see that's the case here, and there was also a styles.scss map generated. Don't worry about that, that's under the hood. And here is the CSS. And as you can see here, the front end is reflecting that CSS change. Obviously, this is not something we're going to keep. This was just for testing purposes. So before we get into the thick of it and start creating login and register views and a logout view as well, let's do one last thing and set up Bootstrap here, and as well as input the most common meta tag for mobile. Just thinking ahead. So we'll start with that meta tag. We'll say meta name is viewport, and the content attribute is set to width equals device dash width, comma initial dash scale equals 1.0, and we can close that meta tag. Now on this next line, you can just go ahead and copy and paste directly from Bootstrap's website. I trust you know how to do that. So there we go. And that's it. You can save that. Let's also not forget Bootstrap's core JavaScript here at the end of the file, which we'll want to include at the very, very end, after the body, preferably. Yeah, and let's actually go ahead and create the body tag as well, just so we can say there is such a thing. And including the Bootstrap in the body for every page means we will cut that and paste it down here. I've also gone ahead and wrapped this inside of a div with an ID of body container. Now in my CSS, I will, actually not my CSS, in my SASS, because I'm going to overwrite my CSS. Sure. So over here, I'm going to change this to F2, 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 nice little off-white, and we have an ID of body container. This is going to have a margin from the top of, let's call it 80 pixels. We'll worry about mobile optimizations a bit later. I'm gonna have to stop my server real fast. This will be where I run the project, but over here I'm gonna cd into static job report app, and this is where static is. Yeah. And over here I have to cd into job report app one more time, and only over here is where all my styles live. So I have to run SASS styles.scss styles.css, and there we go. We'll save that. Now back on over on the other side, I'll run my server again, and we can see that I've got about 80 pixels from the top. I should also give it some padding from the left and the right as well. So I've gone ahead and added this line here, padding 5%, and after that I ran SASS again. I restarted the server, and what we see is that we've got some room there on the left as well. So yeah, I think at this point we're just about ready to move forward and start creating the user registration and get users into the app and make a menu and all that. Now at this point, because I know the app is going to change a lot after this, I'm just going to quickly send all this over to Git. So I'm going to do cd ... and this is my Git repository that I set up. So I'm going to say git add all, git commit, and the message we'll give is basic styling setup complete, and we'll do git push. Now the next step for me is going to be creating the menu. So once I create the menu, I'll create the URLs, and once I create the URLs, I'll have to create the views. Once I create the views, I'll have to create the templates. So we'll go in that order. So now back over on layout.html, I'm going to go ahead and create the navbar. I'm going to do everything, including making it mobile, everything except for actually giving them URLs, because if I give the URLs before I create them, Django will throw up an error. So I will include the differences between when the user is and is not authenticated though. So getting started, I'll just make some room under body, and I'll pop open a nav element. And since I've connected Bootstrap, I can already start giving it some details here. Expand medium. Let's say navbar light, and background is light. And inside that nav, I'll start with a link whose class is navbar brand. And this we can actually give an href because we already have the index page, so we'll include this one. And inside here we have some Django context, and we'll say URL index. Remember, Django has its own way of handling URLs. And here, just in bold, we'll say job report. Alright, cool. Now we'll have a button. Class is navbar toggler, whose type is button. This is for the mobile stuff, and we're going to want to say data-toggle collapse. This is all Bootstrap stuff for mobile. Data target equals navbar nav. Let's say aria controls. I don't know if you've ever actually set up a mobile menu with Bootstrap's under the hood stuff. This is pretty much what it looks like. I'll put those in quotes. And we want aria label. The label on this can just say toggle navigation. And we can close that. And inside that button, we just want a span whose class is navbar toggler icon. And that's Bootstrap. It's gonna bring in that standard hamburger icon for us. So what else? That was just setting up the button. Now we want div class collapse navbar collapse. ID is navbar nav. And in here, this is really where we throw the menu. So let's make our menu an unordered list. whose class is navbar dash nav and Mr. Auto. Cool. Now we've got an unordered list inside this div. Now we can start throwing list items in here. But we want list items to pretty much show on a specific basis whether the user is authenticated or is not. So this is where Django syntax comes in. I'll just throw in some curly brackets, and in here I will throw these guys, and I'll say if user dot is underscore authenticated, and Django already knows how to do this under the hood, then I will show some specific content, and when that content is done, I'll just do this ahead of time. I'll just put in my end if. So here I'll just say one word end if. And now up here, I can actually throw a conditional list item. So I'll say class is navbar, no, sorry, class is nav item, nav dash item. And inside of here we have an A element whose class is nav dash link, nav link. Where you see camel case, these are going to be my own custom classes. ID is greeting, and this one's going to say you are signed in as your username. Yeah, so you are signed in as, and again, let's just go ahead and make this bold as well. We'll just say strong, and inside there, we will say you are signed in as, nope, we already said you are signed in as. This is where we put the username. So this is where Django comes in. We're going to do double curly brackets, and in here we're going to say user.username. All under the hood Django stuff. So we can save that. Let's add some more of these conditional list items. Another one that we want for if the user is authenticated is going to be a logout link. So that's really the one link we want them to have. So let's go ahead and just copy this. You know what? Since we're already in here, we'll copy that. And this is if the user is authenticated. For this, we will take off the ID of greeting. We'll lose all this extra text here. And we'll just say logout. Or maybe 2 words like that. Okay, so now we have that set up appropriately. And then we want to say else. You know, yeah, let's actually separate this. What we're going to do is we're going to end this statement here. So we're just going to say curly brackets, Django, context, end if, one word. Then I'm going to start this same block again right underneath for logout. But here we're not going to end if right away. We're going to have an else statement. So I'll copy this guy, and I will say, let's bring it back here, else. And so otherwise we're going to give them, if not the logout when they're logged in, then we're going to want to give them login or register. So that's as simple as, well, let me just, whatever. So we have log in or register. And I'll save that. And then we have the closing, the UL, the div, and the nav. So let's just kind of get this all nice and concise. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And the server's still running. So I'll go ahead and bring up the browser where this is. And here's what we see, because I'm already logged in. Now, if I click log out, nothing's going to happen because I didn't give it an href. So that's going to be the next step, is setting up the URLs and the views after that, and templates where needed. Now, over in URLs for the app, I'll just go ahead and create them so that they exist, even though the views don't yet. But that's what I'll have to do immediately, because it's going to say, hey, this view doesn't exist. So the first one I'll do is the register view, or register URL, sorry, as if the URL should say register. And we'll just call that view register, and we'll give it a name to associate it just as register. Close that. That should not have been closed there. And let's just do the same for login and logout. So I'll just here I'll just type in login. This one just so that I make sure I don't confuse myself later. Login view. And here I'll just say log out. Cool. So that should be it for the URLs needed. But immediately we're seeing that these views don't exist. So let's jump right in and create those views next. Now, before we can go ahead and actually start writing views to register users, log them in, log them out, our views.py file is missing a number of imports that it's going to need to get the job done. So for response, we can add to this. We want not only HTTP response, but HTTP response redirect. What else are we going to need? We've got render. Let's get reverse from Django URLs. So let's say from Django.urls import reverse. And this is just so that we can throw them back towards any other page from any view that's run. What else are we going to need? If the username already exists, we'll need them to have the Django DB integrity error so that they can stop them in their tracks and make an appropriate username. So yeah, again, this is all stuff that's straight from the backbone of Django. I'm just ripping it. So django.contrib import.messages. Oh, sorry, not dot. Okay, so the most important thing for account creation is from django.contrib.auth. We're going to import authenticate. It's the big one, and log in and log out. And yeah, Django will handle all that for us. Later on down the line, we can start using decorators for certain views that require a user to be logged in. So we can go ahead and just get ahead of ourselves and just add one more from Django contrib auth.decorators this time. And this one is called login_required. And that's really simple. Before the view, we just put the decorator. It's an @ symbol login_required, and yeah, write the view. One more, of course, we are going to want to bring in from .models user. And that's good. Now we're going to want to pop in over to our models.py file for the first time. And here we're just going to create the default Django user. And that being said, we will just need to get one thing from Django contrib auth.models. So, and this is going to be called abstract user. We'll save that. And the model itself is just going to be really simple. It'll be a Python class with the name of user, which receives abstract user. And in here, we'll just write pass. All right, so now without further ado, it's time to write a login view. I will just say define a new function, and we'll call it login_view, just like I did in the URLs file. And this will accept the request. And let's start the function. So the way this is going to work is the user is going to submit a form, and if they're not posting data to the login view, then we'll just send them back to that form. And that's the only way we'll authenticate users properly. So we'll just say if request.method = post, all caps. Then in here, first thing we'll do, and I'll put a little note here, we'll attempt to sign the user in the credentials that they gave. So let's create a variable called username, and this is equal to the request.post, and we'll say in here username. And on the next line, same for password, request.post, and now one for user. And here's where we'll authenticate by passing in the request, where the username is username, and the password is equal to password. Now we'll have to check if the authentication was successful. So so here we'll say that if the user is not none, then we will just say login. And remember, that's something we imported up here. Run the login function, and this will take the request as well as the user. And then return them with an HTTP response redirect over to, we'll have to throw in reverse for index. That'll just take them back to the index page. Then we can say otherwise, else, we will return and render a page, accepts a request, and this will just be job report app/login.html. And here's where the integrity error is going to come in, as well as the message. So, or I guess the integrity error will come later, but message will come right here. So we're going to deal with some Django context. But I have message is equal to a string that says invalid username and or password. Could have just said invalid credentials. But anyway, so that's the end of that. So we'll go down here. And now we'll get back to the line we were at before. We'll say else. If the user is not trying to sign in, If they didn't post data to the login view, then we'll just take them back to the form where they are supposed to log in. So return render request job report app. Why's an app coming? Login.html. And that should be it for the login view. Except for how I missed a comma right over here. And that is better. Cool, the register view still doesn't exist. We'll get to that. So before we fix this error and create the register view, let's just create the logout view, which luckily is going to be the easiest one of all. So I'm just going to head down here to a new line, and we'll define a new function. Again, just like we named it in the URLs, logout_view, accepts a request, as they all do. And this one will run the built-in logout function, which again we imported right up here. So the logout function just also accepts the request that's passed in. I'm going to pass that request in, and on the next line, just take them back to the index page with an HTTP response redirect, reverse them back on over to index. Cool. Yeah, I forgot to mention that we didn't have these templates yet, but again, we will create the templates after we create the views. So without further ado, let's go on over to the register view. So we're going to define a view called register, which, like they all do, accepts a request. And if that request has a method that is equal to post, then the username variable is going to be set as just that. And here we'll just pass in username. And let's do the same thing with email. So on the next line, email. So yeah, let's leave notes through this again so that we're clear. First thing we want to do is make sure that the password matches confirmation, right? So we're going to say make sure password matches password confirmation. So first we're going to want a password variable, and that's the same as this. Same for confirmation. It's going to be the next. Now if the password isn't equal to the confirmation, then return the register page. So we're gonna render request, and this will be job report app /register.html. Here is where we throw some context in. The message for the confirmation, which will say that the passwords don't match. Yeah, so that is cool for ensuring that the password matches the confirmation. And so now we'll try and actually attempt to create the new user. So we will try user variable is equal to user, which again we've brought in from here. It's the user model. I'm going to create a user object. So users.objects.create_user. Again, all built-in stuff to Django. So here we'll say username, email, and password, which we've created above. Now we will save that user, and that will officially throw them into the database. And here's where the integrity error comes in. So we will accept integrity error. And here we will return them back to the register page, but saying that the username that they chose is already taken. So render, we'll pass in the request, job report app / register.html. So your username is already taken. And so assuming all that is good, we will then log in the user. So yeah, again, the login function built into Django, we're just passing in the request and the user variable. So now, on the next line, we will return them an HTTP response redirect, reverse on over to the index page. And we're going to want an else as well on the same line as our if, where if they are not posting, if they are not posting data to the register method, to the register view, then we will just return them back to the register page where they can post through the form. So request okay, that should do it. I say that should do it, but then this error comes up. So right over here, accept integrity error, then go ahead, save. And that looks good. Not that good. So in order to get rid of this error, I'm over here in my settings.py. What I'm going to do here is set a new variable here. Again, obviously under the hood Django stuff. But I have to associate users with the app. So I'm going to say job report app dot user. Save that. You'll then want to run make migrations. So upon reading this error that I got in the terminal, it appears to have an inconsistent migration history. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out my migrations and then make them again, then migrate. So after deleting the migrations folder, the dbsql lite3 file, both PyCache folders, and then rerunning make migrations, and then rerunning migrate, everything seems to boot up just fine. And if we actually look at this up and running, we see that I'm now logged out because now that I've deleted the database, I deleted that super user I created. So I don't even have an admin over here. Here, if I reload, I'm going to be logged out. And if I sign in with Gil, it will not work. So I'm going to go ahead and recreate that. So I'll just recreate the super user. What? Okay, my Stack Overflowing tells me to go back over here and do this. Let's see what happens. turns out it doesn't work because I actually need to import OS. So let's try that again. Alright, that took way too long to figure out, but the real problem was that I had to run migrate with run syncdb in order for this job report app user table to be created. And now, finally, I've got my super user account created again. Before I move on, just important things that I thought I should mention that I changed during debugging. I replaced this line here with what you see now, and I imported OS so that it could be used down there. I also replaced this line here. So yeah, if you go back a few seconds, look at what it was and see what it is now, then you'll see what I've done. But seems to be working as is, so I'm going to move on like this. Server is up and running with no problems. Front end of the site looks good. And logging in worked fine. The only problem now is that we don't see users appear here because we have our own custom user model for now. So yeah, that'll be the next step. So I've got admin.py open here inside of our app. And what I'll do for starters is import that model. So from models import user. And then registering it down here, I'll just want to say admin.site.register and pass in the user and save that. And now back over in our Django admin, we see that users for the job report app appear down here. So tying up loose ends here on the layout page, let's just go ahead and start with actually creating another link here. And this will actually just say home. So we have a very simple home button that links back to the index page. And so now, as I said before, we're going to start actually adding in URLs, and Django's got its own under the hood way of doing that. So our href is going to be some Django context, and there, like that. We have to say URL, and then the name of the URL in single quotes, which in this case would be index. And let's go ahead and throw this href onto logout, call it logout, onto login, call it login, and onto register, call it register. Now that would be fine and all, except for the fact that the templates don't exist yet. So that'll be the last step, is just going ahead and creating the HTML files. So we don't need a logout page that redirects it back to the index page. We just need a login page and a register page, both of which have their own forms. So to make things simple, let's go ahead and just copy what we have on the index page. And in the same folder as the rest of our templates, I'll create a new file and call this login.html. And here I'll paste that. And let's see, it extends the layout. We've got the title here. We'll call this login page. That's for convention. Now in the body, this is where we do what we need to do. Let's just put a title, login. Now we have some Django context that says if there was a problem logging in on a previous attempt, then we're going to give them a message. For example, bad credentials, something like that. So here we'll just say end if. And up here, we'll actually have the message itself in a div, which we'll probably put a class on later, just so we can control styling. But the message will be in there. Now, under all this, we can have a form where the action is equal to the action is going to be equal to the login URL, and the method is going to be post. So the Django way of plugging this in is curly brackets And in here, we'll say URL single quotes login. And afterwards, we'll have a method of post. Close that. Now we've got the body of the form itself. Here, we want to throw in a CSRF token, some built-in Django security for us. That's a cross-site reference token. Now, luckily we linked to Bootstrap, so we can just start throwing in some classes right away. And here we've got an input. Let's give it autofocus. Class of form control. We'll say the type is text. I'll throw that in quotes. The name is going to be username. And the placeholder, we'll give them one username. And input is a self-closing tag, so we don't need to worry about that. And let's throw in another div very similar to that one. Only this time, we'll just replace the type with password and the name with password. And over here, the placeholder as well. After that, we just want one submit button. So let's just have an input, just class, and again some Bootstrap stuff. We'll go button primary. We'll say type is submit, and the value will be login. And that looks good. Underneath, we want to give them an option just in case they don't have an account yet. We want to send them to the register page, which we'll work on next. So last thing I'll do here is say don't have an account yet. And then in a link, I'll say register here. And now let's actually link to the page the Django way. So curly brackets and say URL register. And as far as I can tell, that should really do it for the login page right there. That would do it if I didn't have this typo right there. Perfect. Alright, so finally moving on to the register model, or sorry, register template. I'll go ahead and in this folder create a new file, call it register.html. And this is going to be largely the same as login, so I'll go ahead and select all that, copy it, paste it over here. And let's just make sure we say register, and here we'll say register page. Yeah, here's where we're going to want to start changing some stuff. So for example, we'll leave the message in there as is, because registration also has its own messages associated. But we're going to want to have the user post to the register URL. And we're going to want to change a few more things here. For example, one other thing we will want to do is instead of saying don't have an account, say already have an account. And also go back to login page and add an apostrophe because you are not an illiterate fuck, as it turns out. Back over to the register page, we want to change this to login and say log in here. On the submit button, we're not telling them to log in, we are telling them to register. So there's that. And then lastly, instead of just username and password for logging in, it's going to be username, email, password, and confirm password in order to register. So, we'll just go ahead and copy this, get on over to the next line, change this to email, change the type to email, and placeholder will be email address. And for this, we'll just make type password. The name will be confirmation though. And placeholder will be confirm password. And now we've got all of our templates set up. And so that's it. That's setting up users in Django app. I'll go ahead and just demonstrate everything now working. I'm not logged in. I created my super user, so I'll log in over here. I'll hit login. I'll hit don't save. And we see now I'm logged in. The context has changed up here in the menu. This doesn't really do much for me. But logging out will log me back out. Now if I hit login, you'll see this works and takes us over to the register page, which is this over here. And we can create a new user. So I'll create a new user called TJ. I'll say tj@tj.com. And the password will be TJ, or actually, since this is on the front end, it's going to force us to make it a secure password. So I'm going to say capital first letter of every word. So something, something, dark side. 1 exclamation. Something, something, dark side, 1 exclamation. That's going to be your password. Passwords must match. Oh, see? I did it so well and I screwed up now. So again, something, something, dark side, 1 exclamation. Something, something, dark side, 1 exclamation. Register. And you are signed in as TJ. Alright, so last thing, I'm just going to go ahead and send all this over to GitHub before we call it a day here. So I'm going to shut down the server. I'm going to, I'm going to CD back. Now we're over here in the Git repository I created. I'll add everything. I'll commit with the message of created user authentication and registration. That's been committed. So now I will git push. And we're done. You can go ahead and clone that onto your machine to see the changes. We'll pick it up next time.